Welcome to the panel about the future of AI. We are joined here by an illustrious panel, starting with Ken. Actually, Ken is one of our sponsors, Archetype. Give a hand. He was going to be paying for the AI IPA later, I think. You're also a surfer, AI architect, and cowboy, a startup cowboy. Can you explain your background?
Oh, where did that come from? Full disclosure, so I was Chris back in the beginning. So I was I was the first sales engineer of Dataiku back in 2016, at least in the U.S. Fortunately, they've hired a lot smarter and since me. So I'm with Archetype Consulting. We do a number of different things, all in the analytics space. My team's responsible for data science, and that can include Dataiku and other technologies as well. You asked about my bizarre surfer intro. You know, I have a life-work balance problem. You know, with once you start surfing, you'll never stop, and so I love doing it. But I really love learning new things, and that's the startup cowboy. And back in the day, before Dataiku really had a market, I saw this product built by a bunch of little French folks. I'll be honest with you, right? And I said, "Wow, that is really cool. I wonder if there's a market for that." And that's kind of how we started. Mike Bukowski sitting over there, and we started together many moons ago. Anyway, that's me. I'm happy to get into more later.
Awesome. Chris, you were asking the questions before. Now you're answering them. Give a little bit of intro to yourself. What do you do here?
Yeah, hey everybody. So solutions engineer, so I get the privilege of working with a lot of our customers in the west of the United States. So everyone from just getting started in their journey to people who have thousands of users working with Dataiku. And I have about a decade history working in democratization self-service technologies from BI to pipelining to now machine learning and Gen AI. So it's been a fun journey.
Awesome. So I'm Mark Palmer. I'm helping Dataiku host their executive programs. I'm the former CEO of Streambase. I was the chief product officer for TIBCO for a number of years. Now I work on the investing and money side. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys are going to say about the future of AI. I work for Warburg Pincus. We do a lot of investments in the data and analytics space. We've got about $83 billion under management. So I'm going to take your advice on what to invest in here going forward, guys. No pressure. But before we get into it, we just want to kind of frame it. This is a conversation about ROI, about what we're seeing in the market. At Warburg Pincus, we enjoy looking at, we do a lot of work with McKinsey. They did a great study recently with 1,300 participants about who's using AI and achieving ROI. I think Dataiku calls it ROI AI, although I'm not sure if I can say that 5 times fast. And what they're finding is that there are a leader cohort now that are getting 5% of their EBITDA ascribed to their use of Gen AI, and conventional AI adds another 10% on top. That's some of the findings from the report. So with this in mind, with this framing, what are you guys seeing? You're talking to customers all the time, people out here. You're all here to learn what other companies are doing with AI. And Ken, maybe we can start with you, what you're seeing as the most interesting areas or the things that people might have missed.
Well, one thing that I am excited about, and I know McKinsey is the ability to build PowerPoints directly in there in the tool itself. What am I seeing? I love data and I love BI. I think the dashboard in its current state is dead. The coolest new tools I see are blending generative AI with BI, good reporting. I think this is a first step. I keep pointing towards a deck that's no longer up there, but a few minutes ago we took a look at the Dataiku stories tool, and I think that's a great first step. So we're going to see that. I'll let Chris take the next one.
And let me jump in on that, because in Boston we had another Dataiku event, and the analyst there that was talking, I think it was IDC, said that BI's kind of tapped out at about 28% of people in the analytics space and companies using it, whereas Gen AI they believe is going to be more like 75, 80%. Right now McKinsey's saying it's about 50%. So that confluence, that clash is coming into scope right now.
When I say BI is dead, I mean the tooling the tooling in its current form, right? And generative AI right now is being used in it's not the modality that it'll eventually be used in. I mean, Apple Intelligence, the new phone, the ability to guess next best action and then implement it at the same time. That's when this stuff's really going to take off, right? And it won't be as static as what we're seeing today. You know, ask a question, get an answer. It'll be a little more prompt. It will. Hey, this is a nice place to put a time series chart, right? And so let's put that up.
It'll start looking more like that. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I give some perspective on kind of a little more grounded on what I've seen success in, like right now, with some of my customers. And I think, to your point about asking a question, getting an answer, I mean, everyone thinks about answer-style use cases, and they can be helpful, right? I have a ton of customers doing stuff like HR chatbots, right? Just saving straight-up productivity on what's the right work expense or what's my vacation policy. And I think there's definitely a place for that and doing them at scale. But I think where things start to get more interesting on the ground is more what I think we like to call structuring use cases. So programmatically extracting insight with Gen AI and then getting it into a business process directly. So think, let me take CRM text data, let me take a bunch of legal contracting data that's hard to get through, combine it, and then feed it into a customer lifetime value model. Or identify anomalies where we owe someone money or they owe us money, whatever it is. So it's a little bit more, I think, holistic when you're seeing Gen AI as a piece of the puzzle versus like the only thing.
It seems not that different than a lot of our old. I used to do this when it was called statistics, right? And back in statistics, people would always say, well, how are you using textual data? Well, I said I would turn it into numbers and then shove it in a model, and that's kind of what I think you're talking about, right? Is new facets of potentially good predictors that you can add to a structured model. Because we can't forget, I mean, there's a lot of great structured data in this world. And the nice thing about Dataiku is that it hasn't left that part, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you talk about HR and payroll. I also host a podcast called Data Humanized. I had the head of AI from ADP on, and they're using Gen AI to do it for exactly the use case you just mentioned, right? Which is the prep, getting the data in, making sure it's validated, a lot of things that we saw in the demonstration here for Dataiku. So great examples. What would you say people here would take away as a best practice that you've learned from those interactions with customers? Maybe Chris, starting with you, how do you think about, okay, I've got this data pipeline problem. Where would you start with introducing Gen AI into that workflow and use case?
Yeah, I think one angle I talk about a lot, some people brought it up in the earlier panel, is just try to think about the value up front and how you're going to measure it. Because if you can't think of a way to measure it, it's going to be hard to get those first wins for the org, hard to get the first wins for your business unit. So, when you think about a chatbot, for example, you could survey people and ask how much faster things are, but that's not very tangible. But if it's a chatbot related to support cases, and you can see that people are now handling double the number of support cases, you've got some tangible buy-in. And I say that just because getting the buy-in for the first sets of use cases is critical to get the funding to go scale and do the cool stuff.
How do you find people do that? Again, at the Boston event, you had Macquarie Bank and also System 1, which I think are both Dataiku customers. System 1 talked about actually tying the ROI of their Gen AI use cases to incentives and compensation, which is the first company I've heard of that does that. They also said that they got 300% ROI on their investment, so I guess they were measuring it very carefully. But how have you found your customers do that effectively?
Yeah, I think there's kind of the programmatic angle, and then there's the kind of collecting info angle. So we have a value framework we talk about where it's sort of platform plus use case, which I think is a really handy way to think about it. It's, how much faster are we doing the use case, but what is the use case doing? And that requires actually talking to stakeholders downstream of the application and the builders of the application. But you can also just think about what data is produced and how you're doing the business. So back to the support case, if you're already tracking those metrics, you can just track how much those KPIs improve. So I try to come from both angles, actually putting in some human legwork, but also thinking about what data is already being collected.
Ken, you're a consultant, so what do you tell your customers?
So we of course start out with an assessment. We have an assessment framework tailor-made to discover use cases quickly. We also offer that in different forms, potentially free of charge to get going. But identifying use cases, I mean, I love the time-saving side of most of these use cases. We're in finishing stages now of putting together one that blends. It's not even that much of a predictive or AI question. They just have a really bad CRM system that they're working with. Data are on multiple pages. It's a bit of a problem for their customer service reps to get a quick view of the longitudinal history of a particular client. Gen AI tools can quickly, we happen to already collect those data and put it in a place, and so generative AI tools can build a little synopsis very quickly. As far as ROI, it directly, I mean, we even, the client gave us this, that it would save on the order of 5 minutes of time per call just to not have to review this situation. They happen to use an outsourced calling center, so right there, it's meaningful dollars, potentially millions off of a pretty quick project we might be able to put together in 1 month. Come see me afterwards. I'll tell you how much it costs to do that. But I think starting. It's just like in traditional AI. Start small, build something quick, see if it's got any value, and then industrialize it, and make it productionized.
Yeah, I think we've got some
It's
good
good.
examples here. Yeah, if it's good, right, and toss it aside. I remember meeting with a bank one time, and they said, "Oh, we did 20 use cases last year," and I asked how many were in production. They said 2, and they said, "Well, 18 stunk." So that's a good reminder for everybody. All right, so where is all this going? This is about the future. We're talking about experimentation, about measuring ROI. Where do you see things going for maybe Gen AI, but also add in BI? How do you think if the BI tools are dying? Where's that head again? The relationship between AI and Gen AI, those best practices that they translate.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I will say that there's a problem, and I think the stories begins to bridge that problem, which is the ERP system. Well, they asked the bank robber why they robbed the bank. You know the answer? Because that's where the money is, right? And so every single company makes their money based on their ERP, CRM, source system. Those source systems have all the context. Once you pull the data out, put it in a centralized data warehouse, you lose the context. But then to do analysis, you have to inject the context back in. So there's this problem that I think, again, the reason why the story is so interesting is that it's built off of a flow. That flow contains context, and then you're just recovering information from that. Where we're going probably is those source systems are eventually going to get a little smarter, right? And hopefully there's a place for all sorts of different organizations to inject information back into it. But the source systems are going to eventually probably get better. That's my.
You mean AI inside the source systems?
AI inside.
So they're actually helping propagate their data out and taking it back in. Okay.
Or a better way to work with them.
Yeah. So that data layer, and of course the data prep process that Dataiku is heavily involved in is a really important part of that tool chain. Chris, what do you think?
The biggest thing that I think is going to happen has to do with democratization of some form of building. I think that 75 to 85%. Sure, there's going to be people just talking through natural language, and I think that's going to be huge because what do? We talk, of course. But when you think about, first people thought you couldn't democratize BI, right? Then they thought you couldn't do it for data pipelines. Then you couldn't do it for traditional ML, and we've seen that in various ways in different forms grow. And so I think there's no way that we're not going to see less technical folks using predefined agents and frameworks that are built by more technical folks to actually build applications and get answers. So it's not just here's my 5 chatbots, it's here's my set of paints, and I can bring them together to create an app that's helpful for my team of marketing analysts. So I just think and you have to get, of course, with that can be scary. And so I think the constant tension is after you've done your first couple of use cases and operationalized them and seen the value, you think, how are we going to get to the backlog of 200? And I think naturally that governance versus self-service tension is going to be more and more relevant.
Not a day goes by where I don't have a customer that a non-technical title is taking data out of a dashboard, dumping it into Excel, and then doing transformations. That's a form of democratization, and Gen AI will really help that.
So what do you guys say to the chief data officers, and there were a lot last week in Boston, that say, hell no, I don't want to repeat the Excel problem again, right? They've already gone through and exhumed all that logic and data from from Excel spreadsheets. So the democratization conversation is about how do you do that effectively, and the answer can't just be Dataiku, but think process-wise, right? But tools are a big part,
centralization, right? It's visibility, right? It's not necessarily control, but there's got to be some degree of visibility. Most of these cloud tools excel at, or at least okay at that, and so that's one method of kind of stopping anarchy. Do you have any other thoughts?
I think on visibility is essential as a starting point. I think where things start to get really interesting is when you can not just talk about best practices, but enforce best practices in a way that doesn't drive every less technical user away. And whether that's in Dataiku or something else, if you need to make it so that it's easy for people to do the right thing. So there's controls that are in the back end where when you go to build, the right data, the right LLM, the right pre-built things are just, that's what you have and what you can use. And that feeds up into a bird's eye view for leadership and compliance. So to me, it's all about how you try to reduce the friction of doing the right stuff.
So we're going to wrap the session up. Any parting shots that you guys have? Maybe even they asked me to provide a reading list or something that you think is particularly thought-provoking that people can take away. Sorry, I surprised you. We didn't plan this one. I will, just as you're thinking, add in the McKinsey report is excellent. At Pincus, we look at that. It's a meaningful survey with a lot of people. We also look at what Sequoia is investing in, and Andreessen Horowitz. They've done some really good. The A16Z blog is a good source. We watch as investors that space. So, what do you guys recommend people sort of take away, and the parting shot?
I mean, invest in some of these AI companies, and you'll pay a lot more attention to it, right? Throw some money at it.
Yep, that works.
That'll do one.
We just put $1 billion in.
Well, maybe
last
not
month,
$1 billion.
All of a sudden, they get very, very interested.
You pay more attention to it, but I mean, casual observers, if you want to be more educated, put a few bucks into that. That's one place. There's a lot of good newsletters. One's called Datagram. It's former Dataiku folks put together. It does a nice job of that. Trying to think if there's any other ways to be educated.
I would say, don't underestimate things like Medium. There's a lot of good voices out there, and don't take it for granted, but there's a lot of things. I mean, there are some Dataiku blogs that go to Medium as well. Even hop on Reddit and check out some of the certain subreddits have a lot of stuff. I think just don't be afraid of trying to get a little bit of the pulse of the ground sometimes, because things are moving so quickly. Trying to know the next open source model that comes out, what it's good for, what benchmarks are tracking. If we're talking Gen AI, I think there's a lot more. You can get a lot from the McKinseys and the Sequoias, but you can also go a little more crowdsourced.
Yeah, he won't say it, but I will. Dataiku has always provided really excellent technical information that's pretty unbiased. So don't be afraid just because it has a Dataiku logo on it to take a look at it and read about various forms of generative models. It's pretty great.
All right, Ken, Chris, we gave him back 1 minute and 40 seconds so we can get to the AI IPA sooner. So thanks a lot. Great conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.